There's a hot dog place up the road called Massive Wieners.
I think I saw that. Their pictures, like everybody's holding them out like this. They're literally like, I don't even know if it'll get in the shot, but they're like this big.
I think the biggest... What are we podcasting about? I didn't know if you were going to do networking or foreign exchange or Aspergers. Like, there's so many things I'm known for.
Oh my goodness. So networking and Aspergers were like on my top. Yeah. Top list of questions. But I also wanted you to talk about foreign exchange.
Yeah.
I don't know a whole lot about foreign exchange. So.
Okay.
Should we order first?
I think so.
Okay, let's do that.
Cool.
So last time I met with Tim, this is gonna be like a soft open. I'll do like a hard intro later.
Yeah.
But last time I met with Tim, I took him to Kinfolk, which would be like the equivalent to a counterculture or like a Go Get 'em Tiger in LA. And he ordered a chocolate drink and he's like, oh, what kind of ice cream comes in it? And they're like, we don't have ice cream here. And so he's like, oh shoot. He was really disappointed because he didn't get to have like a milkshake. But I was like, I promise you, next time I'm here and I choose a place, we'll get milkshakes. So we're at Soda Rock. It's like an American style diner and it's in South Yara. I'll link it below. Milkshake for Tim.
I had no idea you were doing the start of it. No, I haven't eaten here for a long time. They used to be down the corner there.
Oh, they moved?
They had the corner of Turak and Chapel. It was there for a very long time and now that's a massive development. Are you in the mood for a burger or what are you?
No, you know what? I'm probably just going to grab a drink. But don't let me stop you from getting food.
No, I'll get some food.
I'm just not that hungry.
I try to have a bigger lunch because I usually don't like what they've cooked at home for dinner. They know that. I do the Seinfeld thing where I have a bowl of cereal for dinner. At least I know I like it. I'll give anything a try.
Alright, so I met you a little bit over a year ago. And right around that time, I think you had just maybe gotten a new job or you were developing your network. And shortly thereafter, you started an email kind of like weekly events thing, and then you hosted like a small event, and now you're hosting like mini conferences. I'm just wondering like how did this progression start? Was it a plan all along, or are you just going with the flow?
Look, I didn't actually know what I did was networking when I was back in a bank, because if I was told to go to a networking event, I'd be the guy in the corner checking his watch, seeing how quickly I could get out of there. I think when it comes to the networking, foreign exchange is largely a cold calling industry, and I was watching people sit there and Google particular industries, and I thought, this is insane. Like, why would you want to work really hard to get a client and you don't even have time to build a relationship when all your competitors can see them really easily? So I just made the plan that I would go out and meet all of the businesses that my competitors weren't doing, because very few of them actually network. And I would go to a few events and I liked how some of them were run but not others, but I'd also get these ideas of how I'd want to do events. And I think when we met, it's almost 2 years. That was a couple of small business festivals ago, I think. Oh no, mate, no, it was just one.
A year ago.
I met Martin Bailey, who you know, the year before that at the same event, speed networking event.
Yeah,
and I just get these ideas for different types of events.
When you started your like weekly, it's almost like a newsletter. It's like a very casual newsletter about networking events that are going on.
Yep.
Like, how did that start?
Do you want the honest answer or what I told everyone at the start?
Honest.
Okay, honest answer. I was hearing about events they'd gone to, and going, darn, I wish I knew about that event. Darn, I wish I knew about that event. And I'm a firm believer that if you want to make something happen, you can. So I jumped onto a couple of websites, grabbed a few networking events, and sent out an email to about 30 people who I'd come across and knew, and just said, hey, thanks to everyone who sent me some events. Look, there's some great events on here, and they're not all well known, and I can't go to all of them. So for people who send events to me, I just want to share it with my network. So thanks to those who sent me some events. And I got them all myself the first time. But I wanted people who'd been hearing about events to send them to me in case there were ones I wanted to get to. And the next week I had about probably 5 events sent to me, and it just slowly grows. And I had some that I come across myself and go, geez, such and such in my network or this particular industry in my network might get something out of this event. So I'll look things up and put it down, but I get quite a few sent in now, so I don't miss out on all the events that I was kicking myself for missing. And that's basically where it came from.
I love that. And how did it turn into hosting your own? I know you wanted to, there were like some improvements that you wanted to make on other people's events, but how did it eventually come to you like throwing it down?
I don't start things for them to be strategic, but afterwards it hits me what you can actually do if you're willing to help others and put things on. Like the weekly newsletter, for example. I get introduced to a lot of people who just want to receive the newsletter, but if someone meets me, not everyone knows someone who wants to do foreign exchange or needs to send or receive money overseas. So this is a way for me to be in their inbox every week. And I've had people contact me 8 months later after we've had a bit of a coffee chat and go, oh Tim, I've actually got someone who needs your help. But I've been bumping into them at events that they've seen I'm going to, or in some cases, that's the only touch point I've had with them. Now, if I wasn't sending that 8 months later, it wouldn't be there. With the events, again, I'll tell you the strategy later, but it really starts, I love connecting people. It just seems really natural for me. And I ran a networking group for about 6 months on international trade, and what I found, I was meeting all these great people and I just wanted them to meet. So I brought them together for a breakfast, and that ended up being a regular monthly breakfast for a while there. With the other events, it's the same thing. I go, well, the first one was I had a lot of people saying catch up for a coffee chat. And it's not always easy because you're out networking and you're meeting new people to help a business grow and to get more exposure and see who you can connect with. That if you actually had a coffee chat with everyone who you already knew, you'd never meet anyone new. So I decided I'd run a whole day event where anyone who wanted to have a coffee chat could come in, and I'd actually introduce them to other people in the network so they'd get to know each other. So the plan was to basically, the first one was just rotating groups. With that particular event, I had groups rotating, and I was like, well, it's one thing to come and have a coffee, but how can I add value? I know all these great people in my network. So I wanted each group to cross over so they could meet the ones from the previous group.
Cheers.
Cheers, thank you. Thank you very much. And also the next group. And then I thought, well, you know what? This is going to be a lot of work putting this together. Maybe I should meet someone new too. So I got each of them to bring someone who I didn't know. And it worked out, I think everyone on the day got to meet about 20 odd businesses, and in some cases have some pretty good conversations.
So you're in foreign exchange, and you are a master networker, and you host these events. How do you keep your business on top of top of mind for other people? Do you know what I mean? Like, how do you not become just like Tim the networker?
Oh, for some people, I don't think they even know what I do.
Okay.
It's that simple. We all associate people with something. Like me, you're Tiffany the Amazon guru, not Tiffany the podcaster. But I think you can be known for a lot of things. Like I'm known for networking, but I make it well known. And a prime example was the big event that I held the other week.
I wish I could have gone to that.
Yeah, so we had 100 people booked in, and most of those actually turned up. Like, it was a good crowd. We had a good panel. But as the host, I actually had to teach people, because I designed it, so I get to teach what I want, and I gave an elevator pitch, and I gave my elevator pitch, which I did at the speed networking that you attended as well.
Wait, so one of my questions was to hear that elevator pitch.
Yep.
Can you tell us?
Yeah, so if I was meeting you, if I was standing up to a room like the other day, I'd like to say, hi everyone, my name is Tim Smith from Sable International, and I'm a foreign exchange broker. I help individuals, businesses and organisations save money when sending funds overseas or receiving it, and we do it globally, safely and securely. A recent customer that I assisted was someone bringing in an inheritance from the UK, and they needed to bring in £140,000, and I was able to get them $7,000 more than what the bank was willing to show them from their inheritance. So an ideal referral for me would be either someone who's got an inheritance due, or a will and estate lawyer, or in the case of that one, it came from a financial planner. So yeah, your elevator pitch would include your name, the company, and what your role is. Definitely include a story that someone can relate to. And I say this to a lot of people, like, you're lucky, there's hardly anyone in Australia knows how to be a guru in Amazon, but there's a lot of people I meet, like mortgage brokers, where they're everywhere. So I always say to people, you need to have a niche. Especially if I'm having a coffee chat, someone's got to be thinking, well, if Tim already knows a dozen mortgage brokers, what's my niche? What's something that someone else hasn't said that if he meets someone, he'll go, I've got to introduce you to that one and forget about the other 11.
For example, if there were a million, or if there were a dozen Amazon gurus, I would need to specialize in something. I would need to say, like, I specialize in, like, brands that are doing $5 million a year, and this is why, because I can help them save in this area, or something like that. Like, just be specific. If you are in an industry where there's a lot of competition, it's easier for somebody else to be able to refer you or to find your client. You want to, like, try to eliminate thinking for other people. You want to think for them, so they could just, it could be in their, like, peripheral or, like, top of mind. When they think of you, when they think of this one situation, they think of you, not somebody else, or not at all.
100%.
Association.
And it's really easy, because when you network, and this is the thing that I put it down to, you meet so many great businesses and great people, and you want to keep in touch with them all, but it's not that easy. And I gave this advice the other day at the event. If you don't have a niche, there's nothing that stands out, but having a unique niche, like mine at the moment is wills and estate lawyers. Early on, if I was just to say, just refer me people who import or export, well, what most people don't know is there's a lot of businesses who import or export that you wouldn't know. So if I was picking importers, I see we're at a American style diner and they had cherry flavoured milkshake imported from the US. Now, most people wouldn't see that and they wouldn't think of, well, who's bringing that in? And that's, in our industry, what you've got to do.
Right.
But I'm lucky, foreign exchange is quite unique. I can honestly say most people on the network, I'm the only foreign exchange person they know.
You're the only one I know.
But I still have to niche, because they don't know what that means, and they don't know who my clients are and what to look for. I mean, at the start, when I was just introducing myself about giving a suggestion of who would be a good referral, I was getting referred nothing.
Excellent. I love it. So how many people do you think are in your direct network right now?
It really depends, because it's a bit like, I've seen these graphs and I don't even know what they're called, but you've got this circle in the middle, then you've got a circle and a circle and a circle. Like the weekly networking events update, it now goes out to about 230 people, but I just add a couple every week who want to go on there. And it's been, I only started that at the start of this year with 30 people I knew. So, and when I imaginarily draw the circle there's people who you're in contact with pretty regularly, or who have really great synergies with your business, and you may be doing business with each other all the time. I don't have a whole lot in there, because I'm like this little dot in the middle, because most people I know don't have synergies with foreign exchange. And then you go out a ring and there'll be wills and estate lawyers, financial planners, property advocates who are dealing with people buying property internationally, and they're ones who'd be referring stuff to me quite regularly, and there'd be some manufacturing in there. Then you get out and you'd say there's people who you catch up with every few months. Like I now set aside one day a month, and you would have seen it on the newsletter. Yeah, they catch up with Tim Day. Because it's so hard to do it all one-on-one like this all the time. So I'll just take a spot in a cafe or a place like this, and I'll set up my laptop, and it's a mobile office for the day, and as people come up, I'll lower the lid, and if there's no one there, I get a lot of admin done. It's hit and miss, but if anyone wants to catch up, that's a better day than saying, oh, Tim, do you want to catch up on this day when I might be the other side of town?
Right, yeah. What types of networking events give you the best ROI?
Mine.
Yours, yeah.
Look, it's a simple fact. If you're very passionate and an expert in your field, get into doing guest speaking or host your own events. I don't have to be a guest speaker to see ROI. The event I hosted the other day, now I put all that together along the city of Melbourne, and it was part of the Small Business Festival. So we had maybe 80 businesses out of 100 registered. It was a free event. You get a bit of a no-show rate when you do that.
I asked Tim changed the date, and I emailed him. I was like, yo, can you refund me for that ticket? And he was like, yeah, no problem. It was free anyway.
I did wonder about that email.
I was so embarrassed.
Well, I was laughing as I was typing. I had to check my spelling, make sure I didn't miss. Now, here I am hosting the event. I'm not one of the guest speakers, I'm just emceeing, but I put together the panel. But as a host, you usually introduce yourself. So from a marketing and branding point of view, it's a really good thing to do. Now, I had one of the attendees hang around afterwards. I was talking to a young girl who had never networked before, didn't have business cards on the day, which when I said...
Having flashbacks.
Yes, absolutely. And she said, oh, I don't need business cards, I've got Facebook. And there was a little bit of a groan around the room. And I said, well, that's okay if people you're networking with also use Facebook. Me personally, I haven't used it for quite a few years.
Yeah.
It's not part of who I am and what I do. And there was a lot of other people in the room. So I hear people all the time going, business cards are dead. No. You talk to anyone who does networking, they're one of the most important tools. And it was almost the number one tip on there. So we were talking afterwards, and this girl was waiting patiently, a mortgage broker, a really good girl. I think in her email, she's one of 7 kids, so she always learned how to network. And she's introduced me to 4 wills and estate lawyers. Now, her business and my business have no synergies, but we can still look out for each other based on our niche markets.
Wow, that's so cool. So, I've almost never had business cards, and Tim really gave me shit for this the first time we met, because I met him at my very first networking event here, and then I emailed him. I was like, yo, Tim, put me on that list. Put me on that list you have with all the networking events. And he was like, you know, I don't have a business card from you, so I really don't know. I don't remember what you look like.
Well, the business card doesn't do that, but as I said to you at the time, like, it's a really important part of business. And even like in some of the Asian cultures, Japan, etc., you don't write on their business card. It's quite revered, and that's why they hand over with 2 hands. Like, there's some real etiquette goes into it depending upon who you're dealing with. But from my point of view, I'll come away from an event, and depending upon the style, like we met at a speed networking. I've met you post the event. We didn't even meet in the 1-minute crossover.
Right, yeah.
And I'm sitting there with this pile of business cards, and we'd had a great chat. And I remember saying at the time, well, here's my card. Onus is all on you, because I don't... Oh, cheers, thank you, sorry. And I said, no, the onus is all on you to contact me. I'm on LinkedIn, but here's my card. And I think it was a couple of weeks, because you were probably still had time in Australia, and then you went back, and then all of a sudden the email pops up. I said, oh, cool, now we're connected, because I got your business card. I didn't have even your email address. And back then I tried to Google Posh Ink, but like Posh Spice was popping up and stuff like that. So now if you type Posh Ink, like, your business is booming. So if you type in Posh Ink, you're up there. You're like first page, top couple spots.
Yeah. But what's interesting is every time I come out here, back to Australia, I have my stacks of business cards that I haven't thrown away from all of my networking events, even though I keep track of it electronically. And you know what's interesting, and this is actually what's going to make me get business cards, is because I refer to the event and who I met at that event and who hosted that event. They're all in like piles, and I know them by memory because of the business cards.
100%.
It's like, the only thing I can relate it to is when you learn something, what you learn sticks more, the more parts of your brain you access when you're learning it. Yeah. So if it's coming through audibly, I don't know if that's a word.
Audibly,
yeah. And visually, and you're taking notes,
yeah.
You have more of a chance of remembering if you're only doing one of those things or 2 of those things. So if you have a business card and you're there and you're saying what you do, it's like the business card holds the rest of that, like, energy almost.
100%. Look, I did a certificate for in training and assessment, and there's basically 3 ways that we learn. One is visually, which I'm a very visual learner. audibly. Now, I can't even remember what you said at the start of this conversation. And that's why I jot things down when I'm having a coffee chat with a new network connection to remember stuff, because I might be sitting there, my coffee chats often go about 90 minutes. I'm not going to remember the stuff from the start. So I jot down as much as I can. And the other one is exactly what you said, by doing that, I think, and I'm going to get this right, it's like kinesthetic or something. Or
yeah, that makes sense. With the body. Integrating it with some type of movement or whatever.
Absolutely. And everyone learns differently. This is the problem with some of the education systems in various countries, in that it's very, you've got to fit a square peg in a square hole. They don't account for the fact different people learn differently. And it's the same thing with networking. If you don't take cards and you're talking to someone who doesn't listen, and also bear in mind, if they're there for a couple of hours, they're probably meeting about 30 people. They're not going to remember everyone. So that card is just like, oh yeah, because you can even say, oh look, do you mind if I take a couple notes on the card? Which I see people do at speed networking all the time.
Same, yeah. But I wasn't convinced until I started using them myself.
And you should see my file.
I should.
It's at work.
Do you have boxes?
I've progressed to boxes, and I've still got a lot. I said to my boss, you know when you put your computer on the table and there's a little bit of room at the back? Well, our tables are like this. So I said, oh, you're using that space? He goes, no. I said, cool. And so I've got all these rows, especially for the ones I've met recently, and I keep them in various Slacker bands. So there's a row which is now in a box of regular contact people, and then you've got non-regular, and I've got emailed, haven't heard back yet. So when I meet people, I'll email them just as a courtesy and say, hey, thanks for the chat at that event, lovely chatting with you. Then the ball's in their court. If they come back and say, oh Tim, yeah, it was a great chat, can we get together for a coffee chat? I don't say no to coffee chats, because I know how hard it is. Someone reaches out and get rejected. So I've never said no to anyone. I might say, hey, can we do it as a group if there's a lot, especially if you've just had a big speed networking event. And most people love that, because they get to actually talk to more people.
It's like a mini speed networking.
Absolutely.
But it's a little bit more it's an extended version. Yeah. Nice,
so,
I like that.
And then there's a big pile of, after a few months, if you haven't heard from someone, they just go into a giant pile. But there's certain, again, if you've got a unique category, which not everyone has the luxury of having, but every now and then I go, oh geez, I met someone who did that, and now someone needs an introduction, and I'll go through this pile of 1,000+ business cards trying to find it. Not always easy to do, and I'm not an electronic person by any means. But the other thing is, well, I've said thanks to these people. They could have emailed me just as easily as I emailed them. So do they really want an introduction anyway? Like at the very least, just go, yeah, it was nice meeting you too. But a lot of people don't get with networking. I come across them all the time. If you're not going to be their client, or they don't have a synergy and you're not talking to the same clients, they dump you cold. And I'm like, wow, you've got no idea who someone else knows. And that's why I'll have a coffee chat with everyone.
Same.
A lot of my referrals come from the most unusual professions, that like mortgage broking. I mean, you wouldn't think that everyone knows someone, and some people know more than others. So I never discount anyone at a networking event.
Yeah. Me either. How much do you give to your network before you start getting anything back? Do you even think in terms like that when you're networking?
No. I mean, I can answer your question. I give a lot more, but it depends what your class is giving. See, I actually, if you ask my network, very few of them have I given a direct client. That's not what I'm about when it comes to it. I do I joined a networking group called the Match Alliance, and they usually introduce me as the king of golden referrals. Because when I sit down and I chat with someone, and I do press a bit. I say, so what's some niche industries for you, or the niche industry, whatever. And I will connect people who have a reason to be connected. It's not, hey Tiffany, you want to buy a milkshake, I'm going to introduce you to the cafe owner. It might be, well, you know what, Tiffany, you deal with Amazon. This person deals with eBay, for argument's sake. You guys should probably have a chat, because you might have some synergies and crossovers. A recent one was there's a few businesses in my network got approved by the Victorian State Government as they're an approved provider for particular grants. Now for me it was a no-brainer to just get on the email and say, hey, you've been approved, I want you all to meet each other. And everyone generally sends me, and you've sent it, an introduction email, because I used to spend 15 minutes plus on each introduction. Then I thought, I'm doing too many introductions. I need people to write their own introduction, so I can just go copy paste. I'll network, I'll find people to introduce to you,
right.
but at least help me out with the introduction so that I don't have to sit there and invent the wheel every time.
Right.
And then I'll just tweak it to personalise it a little bit. A lot of people get caught up in whether they're giving clients, and it's why I wouldn't join particular networking groups, because that's all they measure. Whereas I can honestly say there's someone in my network's taking me out for a lunch in a couple of weeks. And the reason is someone I introduced them to, they're now working together and working collaboratively on multiple clients, and he's probably making quite a bit of money. So he wants to take me out for a lunch as a thank you. He's been busting my balls going, come on, I've got to take you out for a lunch.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not all just about a direct client.
Right. So I guess like you, I don't meet a lot of people that think this way or that have this mentality where if you just like give, it may not be a direct win or a direct client. Like I don't think that either. I just connect people. I also look for synergies or things that may be like complementary.
Yeah, 100%. And I think I wouldn't say you can't change your ways. Sometimes it's purely an education process. I can honestly say no one taught me to network. I've since read a couple little things here and there, or it might be a style of event or whatever, but for me, you have to be genuine, and this is just who I am. I've just always been wired to want to connect people. And look, it does come back, because the way others introduce me is very complimentary. It's a really hard one, because there are some people who, they're so caught up in their own business that they don't think, well, hang on, and you're a spiritual person, so you get it, where you just go, you know what, in the eyes of the universe and karma, I'm just going to do the right thing, and if things come my way, so be it. I largely find my own clients and my own connections. I don't rely on people, but when someone in the network does it, it's great.
Last time I talked to you, you were going to launch a cold calling thing. Did you ever end up doing that?
Not as yet, because I came up with the strategy of when it would be engaged, and it won't be me doing it, it'll be a PA or a particular, there's a company called Madonna, and there's an extremely talented telemarketer called Ashley Alcity who runs that, and I've spoke to her, and I do have a strategy of what I'll be doing, and we've had a good chat, but I'm just lining up a few ducks first before that happens, but that will happen. It's more like a 2019 plan, I think.
Okay, cool. Keep me posted, because I'm so, I think I heard Pro Madonna speak at a business breakfast, and until that point I thought cold calling was dead, but I mean, given the stats, she gave some like crazy impressive stats about cold calling, and I'm actually really curious how you do with that.
Well, I know cold calling works because my industry is cold calling, and I can tell you that the people who I've sat next to over the years, they probably write more business than what I do and build a client book quicker. I tend to go for more deeper relationships with clients. I get people introduced through my network, or I meet them at events, and I work on the longer term relationships. The problem is, it's one thing to get a client through Google, which is what they're largely doing when they cold call. It's another thing to actually have that relationship. So in some cases they get a couple of deals, but then when the next person comes along who they also don't know from a bar of soap, and they give them a better price, you lose them because you don't have a real relationship. And I say to everyone, hand up, I'm not the cheapest by any means from the start. I'm a lot cheaper than the banks, but if you want to go with someone who's probably going to rip you off in the long run, go to one of my competitors, because they'll give you a cheap rate at the start. They'll honeymoon you, and then they'll wind you out. And I speak in a lot of areas, and I talk about the dirty tricks used in foreign exchange, which because of the Aspergers, I just don't subscribe to. I don't see why my industry can't be honest and from the start. Now, if an importer in Australia had to buy US dollars to get something from America or from China or wherever, The banks generally, in their exchange rate between the retail rate and the wholesale rate, it's around 5 to 6% depending upon the day. Now I might be doing that at 1% or 0.5% or 1.5%, but the thing is, most businesses are making more than 6%, which is what the bank's charging. Now the bank's lucky because it has all these multiple sources of income, but overall, 6% is not much when you go, okay, well, a business is actually making a hell of a lot more in many cases. And then when you come to me, you've got a difference between, say, a competitor might be doing 0.5% and I'm doing 0.75 or whatever it might be. The difference is very small, so they also need to look at what else happens. So for my clients, I introduce them to people who also might help their business grow or other things. I remember I was at one networking event and one of my clients wants to service particular hotels, and I met someone who pretty much manages a chain of hotels, so I did an introduction. If anything comes of it, that's up to them, but I was always looking out for my clients because I know what they do.
Also, if you meet people at networking or at hosting events, and plus you're getting referrals, people know what you're about. They know that you probably have like a really large extended network where you could connect them to somebody else who might help their business.
Yeah, but it's really funny because not all clients think that way, not all businesses do. I've walked up here at Chapel Street when I first came back to my industry, and there were people who said, yeah, I do foreign exchange. The first thing is, can you do better than what I already get? And I looked at one of them and I go, look, sorry, your foreign exchange person's making all of about $2 on that. They're probably giving up more of their time because in the end, a lot of people don't even know where the wholesale market is. And we had one the other day where they said they got quoted, let's say it was 0.72. They said, oh, can I get 0.74? Now that was actually over the wholesale market. Even banks for $100 million couldn't get that, let alone someone for 5 or 10,000. So, and I know back in my time when I used to deal in interest rates, you'd quote a term deposit rate and they go, can you do better? Like some people just, that's their natural thing. And you could give them 10% when the market's at 4% and their first question is, can you do better? At some point you just say, look, this is my price, this is the value I bring back. And too many businesses, like I've stopped some clients from sending money to scammers. Now if someone's not dealing with a foreign exchange broker, they just go online for the best price. This is why Australia, I think it's something like 3 billion or more got lost to scams last year.
That's an insane amount.
And there was an article the other day of a business who just lost $10,000, a startup business, and she believed what they'd been in her email for a while, in her computer, because everything was in there. And I see it all the time. The most famous one at the moment in importing, for example, is the payment redirection scam, where a hacker will hack into a manufacturer, often in China, but other places as well, and sit in their computer for a while, and then they'll look at all the outstanding invoices and email from the manufacturer's email and say, Dear Joe or whatever, oh look, that invoice number this for this amount due on this day, because they know it all, they're in there. We've had an issue with the bank, had to open up a new bank account, here's our details. Now if you get that and you don't notice scams going on, the first thing you're doing is you're going online and sending money to a scammer. But when my client emails me and says, oh, they've changed their bank account, I'm straight on the phone to them and say, look, I'm not sending this yet. I need you to do a few things to make sure it's genuine, such as ringing the manufacturer. Don't email them because the hackers are sitting there 24/7 waiting for it. But if you want to go for the cheaper price, if someone goes, just deal online, I'll give you this great price, well, it may not be that cheap if you actually get sucked in by a scam.
That's crazy. So you have a lot of freedom with your job right now. Like your work is really supportive. Like they're kind of just like, Tim, do you.
Yeah.
Right? Has your quality of life increased since having that freedom to like be creative, or like do you enjoy work more?
Yeah.
How has it changed for you?
I think so. Like I've got freedom to an extent. We do have regular meetings to find out what's been happening, where we've been going, slight changes of directions, like when you're a particular niche area like I'm at the moment, I tend to do a bit less of the overall general networking. It's really weird because I'm equally happy being alone and having my quiet time as I am talking to a room of 100 or 1,000 people or whatever it might be. I think we all play roles at times. Like I talk to a lot of other guest speakers, and even people in the entertainment industry will often say who they are on stage is someone different. I think I'm a bit of a hybrid at all time, but most people don't think of me as someone quiet and reserved. They just think of me as someone a little bit over the top. And you notice I sometimes waffle on and go off in directions away from whatever your question was, just how my brain lies.
Yeah, no,
that's right, you're asking me about work. I get an energy from meeting certain people, or if there's an event, there's a buzz about it. But sometimes I'm left afterwards just absolutely drained, depending upon if I was silly enough to book a whole day after a breakfast event.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, especially if I posted it.
Yeah. I know he's talking from experience. One of the most fascinating things about you is that you have Aspergers.
Yep.
Actually, the fact that you have Aspergers is not the most fascinating thing, but your ability to be such a people person and to be engaged in conversations and be so relationship oriented, because technically you're not supposed to be able to be like that.
100%. Yeah.
And so how are you like that? And yeah, I guess if you could just talk
Yeah, look,
about that.
now obviously Asperger's is on the autism spectrum, and they use the word spectrum because that's what it is. When I was doing a course, someone brought up a quote, which I don't know who said it, was something like, when you've met one person with Asperger's, you've met one person with Asperger's, because everyone's different, you know? And I grew up at a time where it wasn't even a known diagnosis. I think it came out in about the 70s, but very unknown, and I didn't even know it until my son was diagnosed. And when they told us that he had Asperger's, again, I didn't know, but they were describing what the stereotypical traits were. And I said, well, that's just like me. That's just like me. And any psychologist in the spectrum field would know this, because there are a lot of undiagnosed parents out there, and they just give you the knowing nod. Like, and I came across it myself. I thought, well, if they've said he's got this thing, I'm going to have a bit of a read about it, and I'm reading it. And I was like, I tick so many boxes. One of the ones that I don't tick is that whole social thing. Growing up in a time that wasn't known, I was very fortunate. I was a sporty kid. I was always one of the fastest in school and played a lot of sports. But there's so many other things. Like at age 12, I stopped playing footy because I set the rule. And that's the thing, when it comes to networking, I was faced with a choice. I could either be a cold caller like everyone else, or I could be a networker. And something that people with Asperger's are really good at doing is setting rules for themselves.
Oh, wow.
Majority of the time, it actually fits in with society's rules, not always. But even when they do something wrong, people with Asperger's, they just get something in their head, and that is their sole focus. Everything else is a little bit they're oblivious to. When it comes to networking, for me, I've just set myself the rule that is the best way to build relationships and have decent clients where you know and you look out for them. Whereas I don't see that with cold calling. I was probably lucky I did get put on some courses when I was in the bank. So for people who work in banks, generally you do get looked after as far as your professional development goes, because they have to have a certain budget put aside for that. So I did some presentation stuff. It's really, and again, it's a role. There's a lot of very famous actors and actresses who have Asperger's. But people with Asperger's, and a lot of them when they're suffering social anxiety or depression, they don't realise that there are avenues for them, like acting. They get to be someone else. So a lot of them are actually really good at it. And when they've got a singular focus, like kids growing up, you talk to a kid who knows Pokemon, and they rattle off every stat under the sun, or they're into sports, whether it's NFL or AFL or whatever it might be, and you've got some kid who looks like he's an encyclopedia of it, there's a good chance they're on the spectrum. And that used to be me, because football was my passion. So anything that's my passion, I throw myself into, and at the moment it's foreign exchange, networking. There's some of my passions that I'm really directed at.
I almost feel like I might be on the spectrum.
And why is that?
Well, because I do have social anxiety. It's part of the reason why I put myself out there and decide to do things that are uncomfortable for me to do.
Yep.
Like one of them is speaking. I decided to public speak and also start like a podcast and a vlog, so I can start connecting my brain to my mouth.
Yeah.
Whereas like usually I'm just better at writing,
Yeah.
and when I try to speak, it just doesn't come out right.
Well, it's an interesting observation because they say people with Aspergers have so many more thoughts than a neurotypical person. And I don't know what the figure is. I'll pull one out. Let's say it's like 10,000 more thoughts a day. And that's why sometimes it's really hard to articulate. I get yelled at home sometimes because I'm just standing there like a stunned mullet because there's just way too much input coming in at once.
That happens to me all the time.
Yeah, well, you should check it out. The interesting stat, and I know this is a real one because I did a talk on how to identify Asperger traits in children, and the diagnosis ratio is 8-to-1, 8 boys for every 1 girl. But realistically, there is just as many girls and women on the spectrum as there are boys. But because girls are a little bit better at socially adapting and also maybe just taming down certain behaviours to fit in a bit more, whereas guys just seem to be totally oblivious, and that's why they stand out a little bit more and people go, gee, he's a bit of an odd bod or whatever it might be. I know on the internet at the moment there's massive, I won't say anti-autism, but if anyone does anything stupid in a computer game, they go, oh, are you autistic? The thing they don't get is most autistic people are better at games than them because they're so wired computer-wise, and when they're playing and they're focused and they play repeatedly, they become some of the best players because that's what they do. Most
it's like a pinpoint like focus.
Yeah, we spoke earlier about what I was like in the bank at networking. The only exception to that is if someone was into fantasy football, which was my focus at the time, and I was an absolute freak and so obsessed with it that if someone was doing it, I would chew their ear out for 2 hours. Another very big Asperger thing, I wouldn't even notice if they needed to go to the bathroom no matter how much they shuffled or if they were looking around at their watch, totally oblivious. So I've got a lot of things that definitely tick boxes there, but a lot of people say, oh no, you don't have it, because they know someone else who's got it who could never get on stage and talk to an audience.
Right, it just comes out differently in different people.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So interesting. So do you have any tips for parents with kids, either with Asperger's or autism on the spectrum, or do you have any advice for people just out in the real world who are like have to work or interact with other people?
Yeah, look, the whole thing is from a parent point of view, and everyone's got to make their own choice that's right for them or their kids. But one thing that was really heartbreaking was when my son, we homeschool him now, but when we didn't, he was at a state school, and he had a bit of support from some of the other students who were also getting a little bit of education about it. But there was another kid who went home who was on the spectrum and said to his mum, am I retarded? Because the mum's parents and extended family didn't want to acknowledge it as a condition because perhaps some of them had similar traits and said, no, he's just like us, the same thing I said. So this kid's growing up not knowing he actually has a condition even though he's been diagnosed, whereas my son, he's known since kindergarten, and I don't know what the equivalent is in America for kindergarten, but it's preschool.
It's kindergarten.
Okay, so he's known since then because we were very fortunate. One of the aides or teachers there obviously had a child in her family who acted very similarly. So we were detected very early, and he's known right from the start, and he embraces it. He does, he used to do YouTube clips, and his call sign was Awesome Aspie. That's his player name.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, so it's, I would say, look, definitely my wife's the better person to talk about this. She's a much better parent than I am because we'll blow up in the house every now and then because she's actually got Asperger's as well, but she has a much better take on everything, whereas once I get singularly focused on stuff, it's a bit tough. But I think the big thing, and I've learnt this from her, is that Asperger kids aren't naughty, even though in school they're portrayed to be. Sometimes their minds are wandering off elsewhere, so it's like they're not paying attention. I was very destructive in class because maths was too easy for me. I knew the answers before she even wrote it on the board, and my report card would say, Tim got an A, but he could do better if he concentrated in class and didn't disrupt all the other students. And I'd say to my mum, well, what's better than an A? You know, now when it got to the hard stuff, I had no discipline because numbers came so easy for me. Once maths got really hard, I didn't have to study, I didn't have any routine. So kids need these routines, and people on the spectrum need them more than anyone else. They love their routines. But we would take our son to a toy store and there's some kid throwing a tanty. My son never did, because if he wanted to look at a toy, we would let him look. You're in the toy store, they can play with it in there. You don't have to buy it. You don't have to say no and drag him away. We would give him 5 minutes and then he was bored and we'd move on. So he was a lot happier than the kid who just had a ball snatched away from him. So yeah, it's really a case of sometimes, and they're not always able to articulate it, but to sit down and find out what's going on and have really open dialogue. Because I can tell you, I don't have a relationship with my mother or my father. Now, I grew up at a time where it wasn't known, but some of the stuff that happened early on, I haven't seen my dad, except for a funeral, since I was 12. Haven't seen my mum in the last 15 years. And I'd put some of that down to Aspergers and not knowing they'd actually have it.
See, I also have this thing going on with my family right now.
Yeah.
And part of it is because I wish that they had learned to understand, or cared enough to understand me as a person, to understand what I needed exactly, or to just let me like play with the equivalent of playing with a toy for 5 minutes before, like, you know, smacking it out of my hand.
Yeah. And
so I think that's just like, I don't know if I have Asperger's or not. Maybe I do. Maybe.
Well, someone asked me, "Hey Tim, do you think Tiff's on the spectrum?" I said she might be.
I think there might be. But in general, good as a parent to just really learn about your child and see what it is exactly what's going on, what they need. You and your wife seem ahead of your time, almost.
I'd say she is. Like, when you say any advice for parents, I've met people who say they got the spectrum, and my advice to them is, hey, have a chat with my wife, because she gets it more than me. I try to encourage her to write a book about it, because, you know, no one's the perfect parent, but when it comes to parenting someone on the spectrum, she has done exceptionally well. And not that he's the perfect child, no one is, no one's the perfect parent, but they have a fantastic relationship and they get each other. You know, he says to me, "Oh, you don't understand me." Probably right, because he and I have Asperger's differently, whereas those two have it very similarly.
Do you listen to music?
Oh yeah.
So what, do you listen to it on apps or on like YouTube, or what? How do you
YouTube? A little bit, because sometimes I'm on a computer that doesn't have a spot to put a CD in. I'm still very much a CD person, or MP3. Yeah, I'm more an Android person than an Apple sort of person. But yeah, I've got a I think I use Samsung mostly.
What's like your top 3 right now?
Songs. They're not going to be modern.
That's okay.
Oh, geez, I think, like, if there's 3 people who I listen to the most, it was when I was writing a book, Meatloaf. And a lot of people in Australia have all grown because he had a bad performance at the AFL Grand Final, but he's one of the best entertainers I've ever seen live, who actually sounds like his CDs as opposed to some. Brilliant singer, musician, but more important, performer. Ace Frehley. So some of his Kiss stuff and non-Kiss stuff. And one that's a little bit, not everyone's heard of, is Eva Cassidy. Now, she was essentially blues performer, but you couldn't categorise her as that. She does a lot of things. Does a lot of covers and rejig songs. And she was in the Washington area and passed away from cancer. But when I wrote the book, I wrote it to Meatloaf and Ace Frehley, and I edited to Eva Cassidy, who's got probably one of the best voices you'll ever hear.
What do you do to relax? Do you ever relax?
I do. And I don't do all the things I'd like to. I'd love to be doing meditation. I'm not doing it at the moment. I'd love to be going out to nature night. At the moment, we play a lot of computer games.
Nice.
The writing,
together?
Yeah, as a family.
Like what kind of games?
At the moment, we're playing one called Warframe. We were doing Overwatch. He's into Just Cause, and the whole variety. Like, for me, look, when you have kids, this is the tough thing. A lot of people, when, like, you don't have any children yet, you have your life and then you have your life as a family person. And I used to go, for relaxation, I'd go to the movies every week. Once you've got kids, that falls away, because you start to also do what they're into, especially if you're going to bond. Like, I grew up with parents that were only into their own thing and they would drag us along. It didn't matter what you wanted to do. And all that does is, longer term, you end up not having a great relationship with your kids. So, especially spectrums, a lot of parents think it's a good idea to punish a child by taking away their iPad or their computer or turning off the Wi-Fi, which I've done as well. You are just asking for our house to explode. No, you really are. So, look, as a parent, if you want to have a good relationship with your kids, you've got to bond with them over the things that they're into, while also introducing them into the stuff that you're into so they can learn from your things. But also the writing, I haven't done it for a few years now. I need to pick up the book and continue with it. But I found that very relaxing and therapeutic because of the messages in the book. So
And it's also just like a conversation with you and like your whatever's going on with you inside.
Yeah.
So it's a very like solitary, like relaxing, soothing thing. You're just talking to yourself almost.
Absolutely. I used to write poetry in high school. Very, very bad. I love this girl's sort of poetry and how she's this something to put on a pedestal sort of thing. And I've kept it, and I've read it as an adult, and geez, it's cringy. I can't believe I actually gave them to girls. Like, this is the whole Asperger thing.
So you were talking to us about your poetry.
Oh yeah, look, it was woeful stuff. But I remember one day I jumped through a window at school because it was the next classroom, and I wrote not poetry, but just this girl's name and how hot she was, and all this on the like all over the blackboard, thinking that would be cool and they would appreciate it. Apparently she was quite embarrassed.
How old were you? And are you still
Maybe
in
14.
contact with this girl?
No, the restraining order won't allow it. I don't know. I'm sure she knew it was me, but I don't know. I never put my hand.
Nobody knew it was you then. Only you knew it was you.
I think people would have suspected.
Oh, it's too good. Where do you go for your like world news? Because you're one of the few people I know that can talk to anybody about anything. And part of that is because you keep yourself informed about what's going on in certain, and I don't know how in depth you research things, but you do tend to know a lot about like a lot of different things, and you can hold a conversation with anybody. So, like, where do you go to get your news, your updates?
Look, there's a couple of places, and sometimes I wouldn't even read the whole article. I'll let you know, I'm not a fan of news.
Me either.
And I haven't watched news for quite some time, and if there's a headline that looks a bit disturbing, I won't read it because I don't want to put my body through how it's going to react to certain things, like for example child abuse and all that sort of.
I'm the exact same.
Yeah.
I'm so sensitive that I just block some of those things out because it will affect me too much.
And it's not to be ignorant. Like, I'll read the heading and you catch snippets, whether it's conversations or whatever else, but you don't need it written because journalists, etc., are brilliant writers and they're brilliant at evoking emotions, but most of what they write about is negative. And I don't need that, and I don't need those images, and I didn't need it growing up. Like, one of the craziest things, we had to stop watching a program in Australia because they always go, coming up in the news. Now, they're putting it on during a kids program, and some of the stuff and the images are just totally inappropriate and they don't get it. So good luck to them, but they've just lost a viewer because we've got kids that get disturbed by what they're seeing or hearing. So it's not even a case of avoiding the news. But look, I'll catch headlines. I'm a big fan of just seeing the headline pops up. I used to like the Herald Sun, but now all these ones where you've got to subscribe, etc. So I'll read a newspaper, but I'm not going to subscribe for a lot of the content that they're putting up there. Not necessarily that paper, but just in general.
Okay, this is a weird question, and it's my last one.
I love weird questions.
Okay, if you had to come up with a new name for a nappie, what would it be?
I don't know if this is the one I'd come up with, but it's the one that's hitting me. In Australia, there's a term for like especially saggy undies, and it's bog catchers. And I don't know if in America that poo is also called bog, but it is in Australia. Because I know that in Australia there are words that have different meanings, and I think at our first coffee chat we went over that you know, you don't want to talk about your fanny pack or anything like that in Australia.
Oh, right.
So you better edit that out.
I love it. I love the bog catchers. Bog catcher. Okay, let me tell you why I'm asking this question.
Yeah.
My best friends here, the ones that live in Oakley, I stay with them sometimes. They're having a baby.
Is that Jamie?
No, it's I met Jamie through them. Okay. They're friends of their friends. They're friends. Yeah. They were friends. Then they introduced me to them. No, I've known the other two for like maybe since 2009, 2010. They're having a baby, and my friend Nick, so it's Nick and Alice, Nick says that it's tradition to never have to change a nappy. Because his father never changed one, his grandpa never changed one, his uncle never changed one, and if he changed a nappy, then he would be breaking family tradition. So,
What a cop out.
well, to help Alice out, I want to make a new brand of nappies. I need to come up with a new name to call them, so I could kind of get around his mentality of breaking tradition. It's like, oh, you haven't changed a nappy, but here's a bob catcher.
Well, it's an Australian term too.
So I love that.
Okay.
For their baby gift, I'm going to make a new brand of nappies. But if they're not going to be nappies, they're going to be called, I don't know, bob catchers or whatever. Do you know what I know? Do you know what I mean?
Did you watch the show The Middle?
No.
There's a brilliant thing that look, it's probably out there, but it was an invention they came up with on the show, but it's probably already out there, where, like, because in America everyone's really big into NFL and all that sort of stuff, so you can buy nappies with teams on there, like team logos, etc. So let's say you're in New York, so you're the Giants, but maybe you're playing against the San Francisco 49ers or whatever. You can actually put a San Francisco 49er nappy on your kid and he takes a dump on the 49ers.
I love that. Oh, that's pretty good. I love it. Even if I don't go with that design, I love the mentality. Like, what would Nick love for his kid to take a dump on?
Find out who his AFL team is.
I know.
Who's it? And more importantly, find out who he doesn't like. And if you can somehow get them on the nappy, you'll get a laugh, I know that.
Maybe a laugh will get him to change at least
He'll
one.
be happy to, I mean, he'll put it on, he'll be happy to have a photo of him with the kid putting, like, let's say if he barracked for Carlton or Richmond, almost everyone hates Collingwood. So if he had a picture of him putting his kid with a picture of the Collingwood logo and he's putting the bum on it, he'd look cool to his mates.
This is excellent. Because, you know, I sent them a stat the other day, and it was the average baby goes through 3,000 nappies in their first year. And so I just wanted to get that, like, as their gift, I wanted to get them, like, 3,000 nappies. But they're not going to be nappies, they're going to be called something else, so Nick can not have any excuses to not change any. But then having this, like, I love this idea of, like, okay, what would the kid poop on? Yeah.
I did something for my brother-in-law, because he's older than me, but I used to have to do his tie. I never got taught how to tie a tie. So I'd put it on, and then I'd loosen it and give it to him, and he'd put it on. So one year for Christmas, I used to always try and come up with a unique gift for people, a jokey gift. And we used to have a binding thing at work, so I did how to tie a tie for whatever, you know. And I'd gone onto the internet, just got all these pictures of, like, all this sort of stuff, and I was step-by-step instructions, and I wrapped it up, and that was his gift.
Nice, yeah.
So you could do how to change a nappy, and you could have a picture of a baby, and you could have a gross picture if you wanted, but, you know, peel it back here, and it depends if it's a cloth or a normal one. Don't get me wrong, it stinks, it's gross. Some parents are like, oh no, it's fine. No, it stinks. It really does.
Well, cool. I'm going to shut this down.
Cool.
But thank you so much for being my guest on the podcast.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Posh Incredible Transformation. But yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it. It's been really fun. It's always like you're one of my favorite people to talk with. It just feels like
I feel the same.
Yeah, it just feels like really natural, and it didn't even feel like an interview, even though like I had my questions and stuff. But like I don't know. I really enjoy the time that you give me. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah. I do feel sometimes you just click with people, and it doesn't matter. Like you don't have to live in the same country, but every now and then you get together. It's like it was just last week, and I like those relationships.
Yeah.
So I appreciate it.
Cool. Well, thanks for watching. And if you want to learn more about Tim, I'll link his info below. And we welcome any comments, questions, and stay tuned for more from Posh Incredible Podcast. too.
Would you like me to have a big drink and laugh and have it come out the nose? I could try. When it comes to events, I was also probably lucky. Got a little fly buzzing around here, a little bug.
Same like things over and over and over again.
That's a very spectrum thing. And you have accidents. My son, my wife was changing him once, so he's on there, and he did a projectile shit. So he's sitting there and it just squirted out and went all up her top. Like, this stuff just happens.
She was on her back on the floor, and she had her kid up like this. Like, oh, no, 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 no. And it was like a newborn, and he just threw up in her mouth.
Yeah, it's happened in a lot of sitcoms and things, but it actually happens in real life. It was different times back then. Like, my mum hooked up with my dad as a rebound because some boyfriend dumped her and she got pregnant. Back then you had to get married. And then the first baby was stillborn, but she took it all the way to term because they ended up getting strangled by the umbilical cord.
I almost feel like I might be on the spectrum.
And why is that?